Draft Mechanic is a proud member of Punchboard Media. Pull up a chair at punchboardmedia.com. Draft Mechanic, episode 86.
On this episode of Draft Mechanic, we have a Kickstarter preview of Dreams of Tomorrow, and we discuss recent plays of River Dragons and Catch the Moon, which we're putting on tap. We have a 6-pack review of Legacy of Dragonholt, and there's a beer primer on Rauchbiers. So sit back, relax, grab a pint, and enjoy the show.
You've seen the future and it works to take a mile. Know that all is for the best in the best of our world.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Draft Mechanic. I'm Jake.
And I'm Danielle.
And Draft Mechanic is the podcast about board games and craft beer and anything we can do to tie the two together.
Here at Draft Mechanic, we like our beer like we like our board games.
Enhance with the power of imagination?
Enhanced with the power of wood.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, I mean, Catch the Moon has those beautiful wooden ladders, and Rauchbier is all about the power of wood, but we'll get back to that later.
I'll give you that. I was going for Enhanced by the Power of Imagination because in a role-playing game, you are thinking mostly about things in your imagination for our review Legacy of Dragonholt today.
Wait, you mean we didn't actually go to Dragonholt?
We didn't actually go to Dragonholt. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to an episode of Draft Mechanic.
The 86th episode of Draft Mechanic, as it turns out.
Yeah, we've done quite a few of these. That number keeps getting higher and higher each week, which I guess is the point.
That's how counting works.
Anyway, hey, if you are a new listener, thank you so much for joining us here on this particular episode of Draft Mechanic. And if you are returning, thank you just equally as much. If you're looking to get in touch with us on the internet, draftmechanic.net is the first stop, and then at Draft Mechanic on all your favorite social media, as long as those social medias are Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, because those are the ones we are currently on.
We also have a Board Game Geek Guild, that is guild number 2470, and there will be a thread up for this episode and every episode, so if you have an opinion on what we're talking about, that would be the place to share it.
Hey, quick shout out to Ben Ogden being the latest person to pick up the Draft Mechanic micro badge on Board Game Geek. If you would like a Draft Mechanic micro badge, you can do so. Go to that guild. Which number is it again?
2470.
There is a thread telling you how you can get that micro badge, or you can just find one of our profiles or click anything on the internet that leads you there. But yes, if you would like it, you can get it, and even if you need Geek Gold for it, we can hook you up. Just go say something in that thread, and thank you to all of the 33 people that have purchased that badge so far. I guess ourselves included, so 31.
If you are in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, we do twice monthly meetups. Our next one is going to be on Tuesday, October 16th, which is probably if you're listening to this today, because I know we're recording this late on Monday. That is at Salud Cerveceria, but our next one after that is going to be on November 1st. That is on the first Thursday of every month at Good Road Cider Works. The Salud one is on the third Tuesday of every month. So if you are in the area, we would love for you to come out, play some games, drink some delicious beverages, have a great time.
I mentioned in our last episode that we had a chance to hop on Gumbo Live with our friend BJ over at Board Game Gumbo. You can find it Board Game Gumbo on Facebook or on YouTube if you want to check out that show we did with them. We just this last week did another recorded video interview where we were on the show Game All Nite, which is a show kind of in a late night talk show style with Chris Whitpan. And the episode that we were on will be going live on Thursday, November 8th, if you want to check that out. So you can go subscribe to that channel now and obviously catch the other cool content in the meantime.
I think Eric Summer is on the week before us,
yes.
So I'm sure he has some interesting stories and anecdotes to tell.
At the very least, you get to listen to Eric Summerer talk for an hour, so that's exciting.
It is.
Yeah, but we had some fun. We had a talk, obviously, a lot about beer and a lot about board games, and the game show, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it had a very interesting twist on what we do on our show here. So props to Chris and Bartender Dan for coming up with that show idea, and you will get to see that on November 8th.
Or after that, because that's how YouTube works.
That is how the internet works. You can still listen to these things after the date of release.
Nothing ever goes away on the internet.
Speaking of things that are going to be released in the future, great segue, I know. I was really surprised to hear Digidiced, the app developer, is going to be releasing a Castles of Burgundy app. This team over at Digidiced has done Patchwork, Terra Mystica, Stockpile, and a number of other games that have translated really, really well. And the Castles of Burgundy app, I mean, I'm interested to see this moving to an app because I want to play it more, and I'm really hoping that Digidiced can bring some of its... I mean, I don't want to say that Castles of Burgundy is ugly, because I feel like that's a beaten dead horse. It's not the most visually appealing game. It's a good-looking game, but Digidice definitely has a higher level of production than we see in a lot of that space.
I'm less interested in the fact that they are taking the look of it and possibly updating it a little bit than I am that they're taking the fiddliness out of it. Because the most annoying part of playing Castles of Burgundy is making sure that you put the right chits that are randomized in bowls that they don't give you to pull out of on the right spaces for the player count, making sure you have everything that's going to be replaced, and this is going to take care of all of that for you because it's an app. That's what apps do. And that's going to be really neat. If you just wanted to play a quick game, maybe I'm assuming that they're going to have online play. Digidice usually does.
Have fantastic online play, so I can only imagine.
So if you wanted to knock out a quick game with somebody, you wouldn't have to worry about, spending all that time with the upkeep part of Castles of Burgundy.
I could see that. I'm just also really excited to see Digidice tackling more of these kind of mid-weight Euros. They did Terra Mystica in the past, and that app is fantastic. They also had, I think, Le Havre Inland Port and a few others in that kind of space that have turned out really nice. So I'm excited, and I'm hopeful to see what they bring down the lines. Is there anything else in that kind of mid-weight Euro space you think would be a good removing fiddliness kind of application for them to attack?
I mean, I think Citrus would make a good thing just because it is so pretty and it would have a nice translation. And it does have those little tiles which can get sort of knocked around if somebody knocks into the table or something, which is apparently a problem that lots of people have. But I think it would translate really well, and it's a fun game, and I would just like to see it get a little bit more exposure. So I guess I would like to see that one, not necessarily because it needs an app implementation, but because I would like to see more people playing Citrus, because it's good.
That's a really good point. I would kind of like to see La Granja on an app, because that is a game that I honestly have not gotten back out since we played it originally, because I just don't want to go through the deal of setting up all the stuff and remembering what all the little things do. I feel like there's a space for those kind of games that have a good bit of pieces to them to kind of simplify things, take some of that back end out, and get those on that kind of app format. I don't know if it would fit on a phone screen. Maybe that would be a tablet-only kind of one. But I mean, they did it with Terra Mystica.
Does A Feast for Odin need a tablet app?
Ooh, that's a really good thought. I hadn't thought about something like that. I mean, they did Agricola. Agricola is an app, so why not Feast for Odin someday? I don't know.
I'm not 100% how those things relate, but okay.
Well, I'm thinking of big Uves. Mainly at that point. But, you think about what app developers have done in the last few years with board games. I can't see a reason that a game like A Feast for Odin couldn't happen someday.
I'm really much more apt to play a game that is a tile placement game in an app implementation than something that has a lot of card text. Because as good as the Race for the Galaxy app was, or a lot of these other apps that have a lot of card-heavy gameplay, I don't have a giant phone. I have small hands, so I like a small phone. So reading those cards is very difficult, and it takes up your entire screen real estate, and it looks just silly. So for me, I would get a lot more use out of something with like a tile placement as opposed to a card-based game.
Okay.
I'm excited about the Terraforming Mars app because I know what most of those cards are, but if I didn't know what they were, I probably wouldn't use it because just reading through the cards would be such a pain in the butt.
Speaking of that, we did just hear a few days ago that the Terraforming Mars Steam app will be released on Wednesday, October 17th.
In fairness, you might have heard a few days ago. I've heard just now.
Thanks to the magic of editing, you just learned that information. I don't know. I'm excited. Are you going to get Terraforming Mars for the computer, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we have a Steam Link, so I could play that from the couch easily.
Good point.
And that would make me a happy person.
Well, I know what you're
a happier person.
I know what you're gonna block out to do on Wednesday and or Thursday night this week.
Gonna terraform Mars.
I mean, I will be disappointed if you don't, because I want to know more about it, and I will not be near the computer at that particular time. I don't know. I think I might personally wait until it's on an iOS device, just because that's how my life is. I'm always traveling or something, and I can't really be taking the computer with me because it's a desktop, and that wouldn't make any sense.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could probably log into my Steam account on your Mac, but that would be rude.
I won't do it. You're going to be terraforming Mars. I will wait for Mars to come to me. So, on to the Kickstarters. Danielle, you got the project updates?
I sure do. Homebrewers from Dice Hate Me and Greater Than Games funded at $35,000 and a little bit of change of their $29,000 goal. Ooh. They unlocked custom quality track markers for the last hour of the campaign, or in the last hour of the campaign, which is neat because that'll have a nice little bit to move up on those tracks, make it a little more visually appealing where it already is a nice looking game. And I'm really glad this got funded. It was looking a little rough there for a while, but this is a really fun game, and we've really enjoyed the plays we've got to get in of it. Not only with the preview copy that we got, but at Gen Con. So I'm looking forward to seeing this getting out into the world and more people understanding that it is a fun game and they should play it.
They should be playing it.
Next up, we have Project L, which is actually still funding, but it is currently at 771% of its goal, with $133,000 of its $17,000 goal. This is ending on Thursday, October 18th at 4 p.m. Eastern, so this Thursday in the middle of the afternoon for some reason. That will be over. But you still have a chance to get in on that and get that particular project. Finally, we have Something Is Wrong Here, which funded at $22,000 of its $1,200 goal. That was the David Lynch-style RPG that we talked about, and it is moving right along to delivery. I think that it's just, one deck of cards and a PDF, so it is going to move fairly quickly into delivery because most people will have just gotten a PDF, which... Send that right out.
Yep, I checked the update, and she said that she's right on track with delivering the PDF, and the cards will be following right on schedule there. So kudos to indie RPG makers right there, and that's really cool. I love seeing stuff like that get made.
Let's talk about some new projects.
All right, I got 2 projects. We'll do one here and then one after the first break because it is a Kickstarter preview. But I want to talk about Lovelace and Babbage coming from Artana Games. It's currently in its funding. It's at 1,185%. That's $59,000 of its $5,000 goal. This one ends on Tuesday, October 23rd. So you got about, a week for that one? With an estimated delivery of June 2019. You can back the base game for $20, get the deluxe edition of this writing game with rewritable, erasable whiteboards, and a nice enamel pin and a custom meeple for $30. So some nice additional trinkets, and obviously erasable whiteboards rather than a pad of paper is going to be very nice. There are also some higher pledge levels that include art pieces from Jackie Davis, Celine Loop, and Beth Sobel, which is really cool. 3 different interpretations of Ada Lovelace. So, Lovelace and Babbage is a real-time math game. Wait, come back. I promise it's more interesting than it sounds. So, you are going to be programming your personal board with a shared set of mathematical instructions to hit certain values, which sounds like the driest thing in the entire world when I just say those words. But in actuality, I had to watch the video a few times to get a feel for how this game works, is really kind of interesting. So, you have this kind of grid in front of you that has some cogs on it, and each of these cogs in the first 2 rows are filled in, have some different mathematical instructions on it. There's a +1 -1, a +2 -2, a +3, so on and so forth, and 10, 20, 50 in the second row, stuff like that. And the way it's going to work is you have a set of patron cards, which are all famous scientists, off to the side of the board. You'll have 5 per round, and they have a number on them. And your goal is to find a way to use the different mathematical functions on that center grid to manipulate on your particular player board a starting number so that it eventually gets to one of those particular patron cards. Make sense?
Yeah.
So everybody's going to be jockeying for different ones of these patrons that are going to give you some set collection points for if you end up, getting that particular patron card. But the way that this is interesting is that the programming part of it, where you are coming up with your particular programming set on your sheet to intersect those numbers, is all done in real time. So whoever gets their set of instructions done first takes the first player tokens, flips over a sand timer, and everybody else has 60 seconds to complete, and everybody wants to then obviously complete in whatever order. And then when you go through the actual checking of the programs and running, quote-unquote, those programs to see if you get those particular patrons, it's going to activate in turn order. So if you grab that first player thing, but it ends up that one of your instructions was wrong, you don't get that patron, you don't get that set collection item, and maybe that'll move on to the next one. At the same time, if maybe you want to get patron A on your 4th instruction, but somebody else gets to it on their 2nd instruction, they're going to get their choice of the set collection item off of that first. So it's a really interesting way to do a programming simulation in a real-time way, which is something that's kind of exciting to me because I feel like one of the biggest struggles that I've had with games that are programming games is that if they allow you to think forever to program, you spend too much time thinking about the programming, which, adding in this real-time mechanic, could make programming really kind of interesting. And I really like that. So I'm very interested to see and learn more about this game. Sound interesting at all to you?
Yeah, I was interested in this before we went to Gen Con, and I was actually able to see people running through a couple of rounds of it, and it did look interesting. Artana has been sort of dabbling in this scientist space a little bit with Einstein that they had already released it last year, and then they just released an expansion for. So I'm interested to see, because I know that game is quite good. Our friend Shane, who is always in our Gen Con episodes, has that and plays it frequently with his family. So I'm hoping that this one is another of these sort of really well done scientist-style games that Artana has been going on.
Yeah, I mean, they also had Tesla versus Edison, and
True.
we played a long time ago the New Science, which was, I think, their first kind of in this vein of games.
Yeah, but I said good games.
Yes, correct. Well, I mean, it's, a good track record. Tesla versus Edison, from what I understand, was fundamentally good and,
And
had
the
some
duel.
good things to it. The duel was good. And then people have really enjoyed Einstein, so maybe Lovelace and Babbage here will be another step in the right direction there. So I'm really excited to check this out. I think the art is fantastic. I love the representation in this. They have a pledge to always focus on representation in their games, which, especially when you're talking about science and that kind of field, it's really easy to go the plain white guy route. But they do such a fantastic job bringing in a diverse set of people into these games, which is just super awesome, and I love seeing it. So yeah, if you're interested, Lovelace and Babbage, it's on Kickstarter now for about another week.
Right, we've got one more Kickstarter that we want to talk about, but we actually got a chance to play this game, so we're going to do a full Kickstarter preview of Dreams of Tomorrow when we get back from the break. Want to wear your draft mechanic pride to your local brewery, board game meetup, or board game meetup at a brewery? Check out redbubble.com/people/draft mechanic for t-shirts. So I mentioned Dreams of Tomorrow already by name, but it is on Kickstarter right now, and it is already halfway through its funding goal. It is from Weird Giraffe Games, and the campaign ends on November 8th. You can fund it for $22 for the game, plus $7 of shipping, or you can pledge $44 to get a copy for yourself and also send a copy to a library in the US, which is something that they did for the Fire in the Library Kickstarter, which I thought was just because it was a library-themed game, but apparently this is something that they're continuing, which is pretty awesome. To be able to get games out into public libraries is a really great thing for the Kickstarter to take on. The estimated delivery on this project is September 2019, and the game is designed by Phil Perry with the art by James Messino. The game plays 1 to 6 players in about 45 minutes. It's a game of rondel manipulation, set collection, and a terribly great horse pun.
In the future world of Dreams of Tomorrow, society has collapsed. That's a bad thing. But here's the good thing. You and your team of dream engineers have learned a way to send back hopeful messages to the past in hopes of stopping this collapse from happening. Yes.
I'm sorry, my team of what?
Dream engineers. This is a game about sending information back to the past in the form of dreams.
And we're stopping the end of the world by sending back, hang in there posters?
Hey, we can get that kitten back up on the branch. Don't you dare for a second think we can't get the kitten back up on the branch.
Okay.
But you as a player are going to be playing the game of Dreams of Tomorrow and not actually sending back messages to the past because we have not yet learned that technology. So, mechanically, in Dreams of Tomorrow, you're going to be moving around a rondel, collecting resources, using those resources to both acquire dreams and then put those dreams into your personal dream sequence. But the hook here, especially for me, is the way that this rondel works. The rondel is made up of 4 cards, and the cards are split with a top and a bottom. And you're going to be moving along the top row of actions and then circling back on the back row of actions with your personal player pawn. But the really exciting thing is that some of those dream cards you get give you actions that allow you to manipulate the placement of those cards. So maybe the card that's in 3rd spot is going to move to the 1st spot, and now that card is the one where you're going to be looping around the back. So through some clever manipulation of that rondel, you can kind of set yourself up for really cool sequences of actions. The other thing that's really awesome there is that these dream cards, as you acquire them and you put them into your dream catcher, which is kind of your staging area in a way, you have access to all of those different abilities that are on each of those cards. But once you weave them into your dream sequence down the bottom, they're going to be placed kind of overlapping in a way that only the one furthest to the right is going to have its action available. But that's the only way that you're ever going to be able to score points for those cards. So you're going to have to kind of balance back and forth the actions that you want to be using and the actions that you want to turn into points. Because, believe it or not, you need the most points to win this game.
Do you?
You do. The game continues until somebody has weaved 5 cards into their personal dream sequence at most player counts. And there's also some additional content in the game. There's a robot expansion that you can use for solo play and also for 2 or 3 players, which is kind of neat. And then there's a kind of a quote-unquote chaotic mode, which is the Nightmare, where you have a little horse meeple that is going to move around that rondel, and it is going to kind of interact with those rondel cards in an interesting and chaotic way.
For those of you who aren't Patrick Hillier, this is what Jake was referring to when he said there was a good pun. First, I want to say that the art and design on this game is absolutely gorgeous. Mm-hmm. The art that is on the dream cards is helpful in the fact that you're trying to do a set collection mechanic when you place the dreams into your dream sequence, and depending on what sets of icons there are on the top and on the bottom is going to be reflected in the art. So all of the cards that have an arrow pointing up on the top and a square on the bottom are going to have similar art. All of the cards that have, a circle and a triangle and another triangle, the wild cards on the top, and maybe a circle on the bottom are going to have a certain kind of art. So you can very quickly see if somebody's collecting the same things you are, which is going to be important because they're going to be trying to catch the same dreams you are. In addition, the art is just absolutely gorgeous. It's really otherworldly looking, and if you've ever seen the art in Flip Ships that Quanchai Moria does, it kind of reminds me of that.
Okay.
It's not exactly the same, obviously, because you have a different artist putting their own spin on that sort of watercolor, but really vibrant watercolor style. Mm-hmm. But it looks a lot like that on a lot of the cards. Now, there is a little bit of a different art style on some of the ones, because I said the set collection makes the art distinct, so some of them are in a lot more clear style, but it is really just cool to look at.
In addition to that, I really also got to commend Weird Giraffe Games for doing the full tarot-sized card for those dreams, kind of a landscape mode tarot card that when you do get your dream sequence built out in front of you, you've got this really just kind of nice collection of art in front of you, especially if you've managed to do a thing where you're collecting the same kind of stuff and you get similar art down there below you. It looks really cool. It does take up a good bit of table space if you're playing with 4 or 5 players, but then what did you expect? You're playing a big card game with 4 or 5 players.
The other interesting thing about when you put those cards into the dream sequence is that the part with the points and the actions on all of the cards except the top card are covered. So you actually do just get a panorama of art. You don't necessarily have those those graphic design details showing up in your dream sequence because they're no longer relevant. Mm-hmm. Once you weave the cards into that dream sequence, you can no longer activate any of the abilities except for the top one, which is kind of interesting. We've seen games where you have to make a decision about when you are using them for their actions and when you are using them for their points before. Something like Elysium does that very much so. But in this game, you can still use one of those actions once you weave it in. That top card is still available to you, but you need to make sure that you're placing the sequence in the order that gives you the best set collection. So do you keep a card on top because you like its ability, or do you place something else on top of it because it gives you more points at the end for a better sequence in your set collection?
I really like it when games have a pivot point to them. This is something we talk about with a lot of engine builders, but this is, like you said, another style of these where you have to decide when are these cards worth more as points, or when do I need to start converting cards to points so that I can get it done before whoever ends the game does that. And I really feel like they nailed it with this particular setup because it's not an overtly complex decision. You're only going to ever have 5 cards max down there at the bottom, so you don't have to worry about pivoting a whole ton of pieces. So you still get to feel that kind of excitement of turning it over into the points generation without having to worry about, oh man, well, I don't know if I'm going to get these 35 cards down here. It's fun that you brought up Elysium. I actually just played that for the first time a few weeks ago, and hopefully we'll get some more plays in this now that I actually know how to play that game. But there's something that kind of bugged me about Elysium is that I felt weighed down by converting actions to points, while in Dreams of Tomorrow, I never felt weighed down for it. I felt like it was more of a kind of a free, liberating opportunity to convert those things down there. It was never crushing, but it was a reward to get those points finally.
I think the main thing that this sort of does as an innovation is the way that you are manipulating the rondel when you are moving around it. The rondel is actually composed of 4 cards, each of which has a top and bottom section, and some of the abilities on your dream cards that you're taking not only allow you to rearrange the order of the cards, but some of them allow you to flip the cards over to their back where the action spaces are in reverse. So the action that was on the bottom of the card is now on the top of the card, and the action that was on the top of the card is now on the bottom, which is essentially moving it to the other side of the rondel. And you can really use that to just really absolutely bone another player. Because if they're counting on being able to use their movement, because movement is free for 1 to 3 spaces, and then you have to pay additional resources to move further, or if you can get to an activation space, a lot of the activations give you additional movement. If they were planning on getting to a specific space to get either a resource they need, or to claim a new dream, or to weave something, and then you suddenly switch it so it's, you know, all the way around the rondel from them because they had just gotten past the space that you move it to, you can really make it so that they have to spend a whole nother turn to do the thing that they did. Mm-hmm. Now, extra turns are never wasted in this game because you have 3 different resources that you're trying to collect. So even if I can't do the thing that I wanted to do right now, I'm likely going to be able to do something that is good for me. And you are going to be getting resources on other players' turns. A lot of the action spaces, certainly all of the main resource gathering spaces, not only give you a large amount of the resources, but they give the other players a smaller amount of resources. So I'm not wasting my turn by not being able to do what I want to do, but at the end of the game, if I see that you have like 4 dreams weaved into your dream sequence, and I'm really wanting to get something either weaved in or draw another dream so I can get it in and get points before you finish the game, being able to switch those cards around or swap the top and bottom is really not only novel, but can be downright dastardly.
Yeah, I love rondels. It's something I'm just coming to learn in the last, year or so, that I really enjoy having a rondel action selection mechanic. And this is something, and this game is doing something really interesting with it by having that manipulation and having that kind of a little bit of chaos in a rondel, which is something you're not really used to. When I think about rondels, I think about, all right, I always know what my next few actions are going to be that I can plan ahead for, but then you got that little bit of variety in there. And some of the expansion content, there's the robot that we talked about for playing 1, 2, or 3 players. The robot will get in there, and then depending on the actions that he takes, obviously not taking the regular kind of actions, but it'll manipulate the cards out in the the dreamscape that you're getting your cards from in a specific way or clearing stuff out.
Yeah, the robot isn't actually a dummy player, which is what I was worried about when you said that there was a player that we could add in to get a higher player count. I was like, oh, I don't want to play with a dummy player, but it isn't that. It takes actions based on its own different set of things that it can do. It moves 2 spaces, or at least the one we were playing with, moves 2 spaces, and when it gets to either the dream, I forget what it's called, but
the catching
space, the space that lets you catch a dream, or to one of the activations, you flip over another card, and depending on what that is, it's going to do one of 4 different actions, which adds a little bit of randomness and a little bit of chaos, but it isn't like completely just boring like a dummy player would be. It also means that game is going to go a little bit quicker because a lot of the actions that the robot has wipe the dreamscape selection, and when you run out of dreams when you're playing with that robot player, the game ends. So it's another thing that's pushing you to get the resources you need, get those dreams woven into your dream sequence quickly, as opposed to just sort of dawdling around and messing with the rondel.
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it to you when we were playing with that robot, but there's 3 levels of difficulty for that robot as well. There's a medium and a hard difficulty as well that burn through the cards faster, count up points faster, and also manipulate in really aggressive ways and really kind of mess with that rondel a lot faster than you expect it to. And I think that this would actually be what I was really surprised about is how well that would work for solo play. This is something that was obviously developed as a assistant for playing solo. And I feel like it's the kind of game that you could really learn a lot about the way the mechanics work by playing these robots, so that you could really get a really rich solo experience playing this game.
One of the things that I touched on a little bit that I'm a little bit hesitant about with this game, and it was a fun game and I really did like it, but what I had just said before was you really need to make sure that you're weaving these dreams as opposed to messing with the rondel.
Yes.
And there were a couple of times where I was able to beat you in this game without ever manipulating the rondel, just by getting a card that gave me a strong ability that allowed me to move, I think, 3 extra spaces was the one that was really helpful.
Yeah.
On an activation, I was able to move another 3 spaces. And when you move to a spot, you get the new space that you land on. So I was able to just sort of whip around this 8-space rondel pretty quickly and no matter where you were manipulating, unless you put it on sort of one end to the other end, I wasn't stopped in getting it. Mm-hmm. And by not spending time doing these activations to move the cards around, by more just getting the things that I needed and sowing high value dreams, I was able to win the game. So I'm not sure if you need to use the rondel manipulation. I think certainly in a higher player count, it will give you an advantage over more other players. But at a low player count, I think you're probably just better off like going straight for the resources you need and just drilling in those big high point dreams. High point dreams.
Or maybe I need to play with the rondel more and figure out how to beat you with it. I don't know. Even losing, I enjoyed it. And that's something that I really liked saying about a game. I enjoyed playing with the mechanics of the game so much that it didn't matter to me if I won or lost. But I still had some really, rewarding experiences just being like, oh, wow, I can move this card this way and it turns the rondel to be this shape? That's really interesting and exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say this is my favorite rondel game because I had a fairly strongly cemented favorite rondel game. Sealand. But this is certainly a much more portable game than that one is. This is going to be, if you're wearing your Jenko jeans, it can go in your pocket.
If you're wearing your Jenko jeans, we need to talk. I'm sorry.
Fine. But it is not necessarily like the size of the little Green Couch Games small boxes, but it is a small enough thing that you could throw it in a purse, you could throw it in a backpack, no problem. And it's a nice portable rondel game, which is something I can't think of a whole ton of.
Yeah, not a whole lot of them out there. Well, anyway, Dreams of Tomorrow is on Kickstarter through Thursday, November 8th. $22 to back it. I mean, I would encourage you to.
Or $44 to send one to a library.
I mean, just send one to a library. I think it's a real... I love that. That's such a cool thing. Congratulations.
They're not burning down any libraries in this game.
All right, up next we have River Dragons, a 2000 release from Matago, plays 2 to 6 players in 30 minutes. This is designed by Roberto Fraga with art by Piero. It is a route building and route getting in the way of game. I think that's the best explanation for River Dragons.
Yeah, it certainly is. In River Dragons, you are trying to get from one side of the river to the other side of the river in some weird, like, Hunger Games-esque child competition.
Only one kid reaches land.
Many kids fall in the river. But you are going to be doing this by placing stones and then placing planks across from stone to stone in order to move your player from their starting space to the pagoda on the far side of the river. You have a hand of cards that you're going to be programming each round, and they are going to have several different options. You can place a stone, place a plank of wood, you can move your person, you can hopscotch over another person, or you can play a dragon card. And a dragon card is going to cancel out the action in that programming placement spot of another one of the players. You're only going to have dragon cards in your hand for all the other players' colors that are actually playing the game. Everybody is going to take their actions and they're going to program them face down in front of them. You program 5 actions around. And then starting with the first player, you're going to take your actions, assuming that you can do so. Now, I say assuming that you can do so because placing rocks is easy. You can always place rocks on the rock spaces. Placing planks is fairly easy. Mm-hmm. You're going to place a plank from either your start space or somewhere that you have a plank, and you're going to connect it between 2 rocks. Now, the planks that you have are in varying sizes. You have a size 1 plank all the way up to, I believe, a size 6 plank, which they increase in length every time you go up in number. And when you place a plank, you need to be able to touch the rocks with the end of the plank. So if you have a rock that is way too far out and you've only got low-numbered planks left, your plank falls in the river because that's how that would work. But assuming that you have gauged appropriately with your visual measurements, you can place your plank. If you're trying to play a card that moves your person 1 space, as long as there's a plank in front of them or behind them, they can move 1 space. If you're trying to move 2 spaces, again, you need to have boards that you can move on in order to be able to move, otherwise you're going to fall in the river.
Sploosh.
If there's a hopscotch, you need to be able to have 1 person on an adjacent plank, and then you will be able to move over them. So you essentially move 2 spaces, but if there's nobody there, once again, you try to hopscotch, and you...
Sploosh!
Fall in the river. You're going to keep going around until somebody gets from their pagoda all the way across the river to the other opposing pagoda, and then they are going to be the best river dragon kid, I guess. That's how you play. I mean, it's fairly simple.
Yeah. It definitely seemed simple when we sat down to play this. And we played, I think, 2 games of this in quick succession with, 4 and then 6 or 5 players?
Yeah.
But, oh boy, this gets really chaotic very quickly as maybe 1 or 2 turns into programming. 3 or 4 people are trying to get to the same island, and everybody is colliding with everybody, and everybody has played the wrong card, and somebody played a dragon, and Jake does not get to move.
The other thing about placing planks that I forgot to mention is that you can only ever have 3 planks on a certain stone. So it's possible that you had programmed that you were going to lay a plank onto a stone, that by the time you get to that portion of your programming, that stone is full, and now you have to go around a different way. Mm-hmm. You can also remove planks and stones from the river. There's a programming card that allows you to take stuff off, but you can never have more than one of the same number in front of you. So you can only remove planks that you've already played from in front of you.
Yeah, you can also only ever have 2 colors of planks in front of you. So assuming you still have some of yours, you can only take one player's planks, which is going to make it even more crazy as you try to remove some planks, and then you realize that there are no planks at all around you that you can fit into whatever you have at that particular moment, and then you fall in the river, because that's what happens all the time.
I don't think you actually fall in the river then, but that's okay.
I just assume you fall in the river because I fell in the river a lot.
You did, yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. It's a game that doesn't overstay its welcome, and you get to kind of teach programming and show the way programming works, and show the way that programming games will constantly butt up against each other.
I don't know, you say teach programming, but I actually took the advice of Aaron from Boards Alive's son Benji on this game, and I won both games that we played, so
there you go.
Maybe the young programmers can teach us.
And this is a game that's gone through a few different production runs. The one we played off of was an original copy. It had kind of balsa wood planks and little wooden stone pieces. And there's also like a super extravagant deluxe big version that has very, very big pieces. But as I understand it, the version that's available now has cardboard planks.
That's what Bert was telling us. Our friend Bert has the copy of this game that we were playing, and he was saying that they had changed it. It was originally cardboard when it was first printed, and then they changed it to wood, and then in the most recent printing, they had changed it back to cardboard. And at first, when we picked it up, we're like, whoa, why would you do that? These wood planks are really nice. And they do feel nice and look nice when they're sitting in front of you. But I think the answer is the wood planks are a little bit slippery. So when you're trying to stack them up on top of the stone, 3 of them on top of one stone, it did get a little bit slippery. Or when you were trying to move your little pawn along onto one of those planks, he would accidentally fall in the river when he wasn't supposed to.
Sploosh.
Which, I mean, you get to just put him back because that's not part of the game. There's no dexterity component where you have to make sure that your guy stands on the plank.
This is not Tokyo Highway the River?
No. But I think the cardboard is going to be a little bit more stable than the wood planks were because they had a little bit of, variation in shape to them and thickness and firmness that made it difficult to stack them up.
Mm-hmm. I had fun with it. I would want to play with higher player counts. I think that 4 or 5 or 6 range is where you want to be. With 2 or 3 players, the board is going to be pretty wide open, so I feel like you wouldn't have as much chaos at that level.
Yeah, with more players, not only are there more chaos, but it feels less like you're being blocked every turn because there are so many other players to be blocked on any specific programming space. Also, there's going to be a whole bunch of routes created in places that you wouldn't have expected there to be routes because you can use other players' planks, no problem. And if you've got 6 people trying to get all the way across in different directions of this river, because the pagodas are essentially like a circle, even though they're supposed to be on opposite sides of a river. So as you're building routes, the route that you're building to get you diagonally across the river may actually help the person who's next to you get in their direction that they're going, and that happens more with a higher player count, whereas if you have like 2 or 3 players, is not going to be much of inadvertent route building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad we had a chance to play that. Thanks, Bert, for bringing that to one of our game nights. I think it's a good event night kind of game like that, where you have a big group and you want to have that quick 30-minute kind of fun, raucous craziness game.
It certainly has table presence, and this is the kind of game that when you put it out on the table, people are going to come over and be like, oh, what are you doing? Why are there all these children in the river? It was fun. It wasn't like crazy in depth with it, which I think was a benefit in this case, because there was so little that you had to explain to somebody. You can just be like, okay, you put a stone, you put a plank, you get across, go.
Yeah.
And it was fun for that.
Cool. Well, that is River Dragons.
Next up, we are talking about Catch the Moon. This is a 2017 release from Bombix that plays 2 to 6 players in 20 minutes. The designers are Fabian Ruffard and Juan Rodriguez. The art is by Emmanuel Malin, and this is a game of dexterity ladder climbing. This is not a ladder climbing game, but you love those puns.
Every now and then you just got to get a good pun in there, and this is one of those times.
It's just the dexterity game.
Yes. So, Catch the Moon is, like you said, a dexterity game. You start with kind of a cloud-ish looking base, and it has some slots in it that you're going to put some starting ladders. This is a game basically about stacking wooden ladders. But these starting ladders are straight ladders, and they can fit, 2 of them you can fit into some of the slots at random in that particular base. And then you're going to roll a die, and that die is going to tell you how you're going to be nervous for the next 5 minutes. Either you have to, you're gonna grab one of the ladders at random, and these are all wonky shaped ladders, you know, thin and thick ends, or maybe they're a little zigzag, maybe they have a broken rung, something like that. But you roll the die, and maybe it'll say you have to place a ladder touching only one ladder, or maybe it has to be placed touching 2 ladders. And then there's another die on there that says the tip of this ladder has to be the highest point in the structure. And all that
Structure feels like an overstatement.
All that sounds well and good until you realize that any ladders that touch the base or fall off immediately are removed from play, and your turn is over, and you get a tier of the moon. These little tier tokens that are your mark of shame. You have dropped a ladder, and we cannot reach the moon today. But hopefully you continue to build your pile of ladders higher and higher. And I really don't have a better way of explaining it. You're building a weird conglomeration structure of wooden ladders. And hopefully you're the person that does not get the most tiers by the time either the last tier is taken or we run out of ladders. And you've played Catch the Moon.
You have.
That's really all I need to say about it in terms of the gameplay. But I do want to talk about how it actually is to play. This is a game that I picked up on a whim at Miniature Market when I was over in St. Louis, and I had a chance to take it by the Gray Fox Games game night, played with Alex and Josh from Gray Fox, and we're just kind of like, all right, I don't know how this is going to be. People have been telling me this is a lot of fun, and maybe 3 or 4 ladders in, we're kind of like, okay. But there came this point about halfway through where I think Josh went to go put a ladder on, and half of the structure just kind of like swayed to the side and nothing moved. And there's a collective gasp across the table as everybody's waiting for a ladder to drop, and he just gently places it down, and we move on with it. And then Alex dropped a ladder because Alex dropped a few ladders that day. But by the end of it, this structure we had made was something that I didn't really believe was physically possible. We had kind of found a way to stack, I think, 4 or 5 ladders straight up, one on top of each other, so that it just had like imagine a Tower of Terror kind of sticking out the top of it. Just like this weirdest structure of ladders.
Like a radio antenna?
Yeah, kind of like a radio antenna, but of ladders.
Of course.
Yes. So this is not an overly complex game. It's not going to blow your mind, but I feel like people are going to have a lot of fun playing this just for it being a sort of reverse Jenga in a way. Is this reverse Jenga? I guess it kind of is. You're building up a thing rather than taking things out of a structure.
Okay,
Yeah.
I kind of feel that. And it does have that same kind of thing that you get when you play Jenga, where you're just trying to find the only place that you can make a move. Because especially if you roll that side of the die, that means you have to place the ladder so it is the highest point in the structure. You really need to find a way that you can balance that thing in there and it won't fall over, because even at that point, it can only touch 2 other ladders at most. So you can't just sort of lay it on top and be like, oh, it's the highest point. You still need to precariously balance this thing in there. And while you said you start those starter ladders in some like holder sections on the base, they're not in there super strong, and they can definitely sway or turn a little bit or flip their balance point from one side to the other if you get the structure that far out of whack, which happened in one of our games where the base ladder went from leaning to the left to leaning all the way to the right. And it's so much fun to see how you can get the ladder to sort of hang in there, because they do have those wonky shapes, and you do have sort of choke points where you can place a wider section of ladder through so it's sticking up, or you can hook one of those broken rungs around something so that it is sort of hanging out all the way as a cantilever. And that's the fun of this game. It's not about winning or losing, it's about making some weird tree made of ladders to catch the moon?
Yeah, I don't know. theming is not super critical on this. It's the physical dexterity. I think that this is a really good dexterity game for a bar, surprisingly. Like, I don't have any qualms of taking this to Salute or Good Road. I feel like those are the kind of places that this would work. Instead of thinking about bigger dexterity games like Mars Open, you know, we've always kind of been hesitant to take that to a Salute, or even Flip Ships, we're making it work at Salute. But like, this is contained enough, and there's not as much kind of like flailing or flipping or throwing objects as other dexterity games. And the thing never collapses in a giant, you know, explosion kind of thing like a Jenga tower does, so you're not constantly afraid of knocking over glasses or something. And
or
I feel
losing
like,
a piece,
yeah,
or
or
whatever.
losing a piece, something like that. So I feel like it would be appropriate for us to take to game nights in the future.
Yeah, you'd have to have a bar with fairly sturdy tables, because if
Yeah.
you've got sort of wonky pub tables, this thing is going to get knocked and everything is going to fall everywhere. But yeah, if you've got a brewery or a bar that you go to where you want to have something that draws people's attention, again, this is another game that you take it out, it's going to draw people's attention.
So what I will say, this game is listed as playing 2 to 6 players. What do you think about that? Would you ever want to play this at 5 or 6 players?
No.
I don't understand why that's on the box, other than 2 to 6 is kind of one of those magical selling points, I think. But, I mean, realistically, it could be a 2 to 30 player game, because, you know, you can just continue to take turns, and if you knock over the ladder, you're eliminated or something like that. What I'm really surprised is not included in here is the number 1, because I've played 3 or 4 games of this solo, just trying to have the lowest number of ladders dropped, and I'm rolling the die and I'm building my own structure, and I find it really relaxing to play as a solo activity. You know, when I picked this up in St. Louis, I was in a hotel for a night or two, and I would just end my day by playing a game of Catch the Moon, and I would try to get as many ladders stacked on there as I possibly can. And I actually had one game this weekend where I got every ladder stacked. I dropped 0 ladders, and I feel very proud of myself for that. Hooray, me, yay.
You did a very good job making a ladder trade.
But it is one of those things that I'm like, they said they would play up to 6, but they didn't bother to say, hey, you can play this one player as well. Just here's a interesting set of rules for one player.
Yeah, I'd be curious. I haven't checked to see if there is something like that on BGG, if somebody's put up solo rules. It has been out for a year, so
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if somebody had done so, or, like you said, you created your own sort of system for scoring. I assume that the 6 that they're saying is a max has to do with the number of the tier tokens that they provided.
Right.
Because you couldn't really play it with 30, because then everybody would be tied for not having tiers when the, 15 tier tokens or whatever it is that they put in the box.
7, I think.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's a really
realize it
low
was
number.
that. Yeah, whoever didn't get one would essentially win. So I'm guessing that's why 6 is the max.
Fair.
But yeah, I would want to play this with a small handful of people at most.
I think this is going to be a good warm-up or closing game for the game nights.
It's also not a great game to have where you need to reach.
Oh, yeah.
So you want to be able to get everybody around the table.
Yeah, very true.
So, yeah, 3 or 4 players at most.
Cool. Well, yeah, that is Catch the Moon. But we're not done with it yet.
We're not.
We've got some beer selections because we're putting this one on tap. For more information on the beers we chose to pair with today's game on tap, check out the show notes section at our website, draftmechanic.net. All right, in case you are just joining us, rewind your podcast player to the beginning. This is the middle of the episode, where we are going to put Catch the Moon on tap, the 2017 release from Bombix. Danielle, you want to start us out with the first one?
Sure. From Greater Good Imperial Brewing Co. in Worcester, Massachusetts, we have Goodnight Moon. This is an imperial porter that clocks in at 11% ABV. It is brewed with Chilean coffee and chocolate malts, and then it's conditioned with Venezuelan cacao nibs. It's creamy and has a roasty finish. It's available currently in cans in the market, so up in the Massachusetts area, you should be able to get this one in cans.
That sounds like a big, tasty beer. Mm-hmm. Next up, from Hop Butcher for the World in Chicago, Illinois. Yes, that is the name of the brewery. Destination Moon. It's a double IPA at 7.5% ABV. This double IPA is hopped with Simcoe, Chinook, and Mosaic hops, and it has apparently notes of berry, pine, and grapefruit. This is available in 16-ounce cans. It was last canned on September 5th. If you go on their website, all of their beers say the last time they were canned, which is good because they kind of can everything sporadically. This one's only been out about a month or so, so you might be able to find it in distribution up in the Chicago area.
Next, from Grove Roots Brewing in Winter Haven, Florida, we have Slanted Ladders. This is the pale ale that's 5.8% ABV and 52 IBU. It's a white pale ale with Citra hops. It's got a balanced and lingering tropic finish, and it is available year-round in draft.
Yeah, it looks like they don't have that one packaged yet, which is a bummer, because it's always good to have a nice mid-level pale ale in a package.
If I remember correctly, Grove Roots doesn't do a ton of packaging on their stuff.
Okay, number 4 is Honest Weight Artisan Beer from Orange, Massachusetts. They have Sky Ladder. It's their American IPA, 4.6% ABV, so kind of a sessionable IPA, which is nice. This is dry hopped with Simcoe, Mosaic, and Galaxy. It has notes of mango, passion fruit, and mandarin orange. It's available sporadically from the brewery and in the surrounding area on draft. I actually saw on their Facebook page they made a big announcement last time they brewed it, which was just a few weeks ago that they had that release. So you can find it if you're over there.
In Massachusetts, which we both had to say now on the air.
Massachusetts.
Finally, from BC Tree Fruit Cider Company in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada, we have Broken Ladder. And this is actually a line of ciders. It is 5.2% ABV, but they've got a trio. They've got their apples version, they've got an apples and hops version, and they've got a pears and peaches version. So there's lots of different types of cider. You know we love a good cider. We have our meetup at Good Road Cider Works where they do amazing things with apples. And I'm really excited to see that this Broken Ladder line has a lot of good implementations, and it sounds really good, and I would like to have some if I were playing Catch the Moon.
If only we knew people in Kelowna, British Columbia. You got any?
It's Catch the Moon! Over the past year, we, with the help of Gunnar the Viking Leader, have talked to you about tons of great games from Grey Fox Games. From expansions to Champions of Midgard and Deception Murder in Hong Kong, to new releases like Harvest Dice, Bushido, Rising 5, Multi-Universum, and Pocket Mars, and even a new reloaded edition of Run Fight or Die. Grey Fox Games has been bringing you fantastic experiences to share with your friends and family.
We look forward to another year of sharing what Grey Fox Games is up to with you, including the upcoming City of Gears and Reavers of Midgard, and tons more. Check it out for yourself and sign up for their newsletter at greyfoxgames.com.
Grey Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted.
All right, our feature today is a 6-pack review of Legacy of Dragonholt. This is a 2017 release from Fantasy Flight Games. It plays 1 to 6 players in about 45 to 90 minutes per session. We'll explain more about that in a second. This is designed by Nikki Valens with art by the Fantasy Flight art team and your imagination. This is a GM-less, dice-less, mostly stat-less role-playing game, or kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure on steroids, even.
It is, in fact, a box of RPG that bred with a choose-your-own-adventure book. This game is, and I call it a game very lightly, but this game is a beginner RPG in sort of the most distilled form. You're going to spend your first session creating a character, and they give you a whole list of races of characters and all the information about each one of them. And then you're going to create or choose a class of character, and they give you a whole list of those. And then once you have chosen the race and class of your character, you're going to use that information to select skills in 5 different categories of skills that you're going to be able to use throughout your RPG adventure. Once you have created your character, you are going to start at I think it's called To the Woods or something like that.
To New Roads.
There we go. Sorry, that's not To the Woods at all. But you're going to start at the beginning of your adventure, where you are sort of guided through how the system works. And you will read a passage number, and then it will give you, likely, a choice, or it will tell you to do something. It will either give you a choice, or say, read this additional passage, or mark a specific story point. You are going to go through and make decisions based on what you think your characters would do, and move through and read different passages of the book that it tells you to read based on the decisions you've made. Sometimes you may have to use your skills. There may be certain options in decisions that you are only allowed to choose if the character who is making that decision has the skill that is applicable to it. So maybe it's like, oh, do you want to climb the tree? You can only climb the tree if you have athletics, because you need athletics to climb the tree. Mm-hmm. Or you can only steal this pocket watch from the bush if you have thievery, because you need that to do a thieving action. And you are going to be taking turns making decisions if you have more than one player. You can play this solo, in which case you don't need to take turns. You can make all the decisions.
Or are you taking turns if you are making all the decisions?
there's a thing to ponder, I suppose.
Existential questioning.
But assuming that you're playing with more than one player, one person isn't going to be able to quarterback this decision making because you have activation tokens, and when you make a decision, you're going to flip your activation token over, and you don't get to make another decision until everybody has had a chance to make a decision. So that's good. It's going to spread around the steering of the story. And in about an hour, I would say every session is about an hour, you're going to go through a section of the story. Maybe it's that first 2 New Roads book, or maybe once you get to the town, it's going to be a day of your going about the town of Dragonholt. And there is a very large Choose Your Own Adventure book that you are going to use for Dragonholt. It comes with a map that gives you specific passages to read if you're visiting certain locations. And there is a meta story that is going to be taking place around your adventures that you are going to be interacting with in different ways at different points of your expedition, I want to say. Mm-hmm. There may be some adventures that take you out of the city of Dragonholt, and there will be additional books that you can go to read passages from as you venture away from the town. But when you come back to the town, you will once again be in the Dragonholt book. There are different passages that you can read for certain locations depending on what day in your adventure it is. And you are just going to be trying to make your way through this overarching story, which I don't want to say what it is because that's kind of the point, is to go through the story. But you are going to be making these decisions and treating it like you would any other RPG, but you never have to know what your armor class is, and you never need to know, what your spell modifier is. You have a skill, and if you have a skill, you can do something. You have stamina, which equates to hit points, and you will recover and spend that depending on what decisions you make. There are some item cards that you may acquire that give you sort of that little more fleshed out bit of component that you can gain and lose things. And you're just going to be trying to go through this story.
So I picked this up kind of on a whim after hearing about it on Boards Alive, and I heard them talking really, positive things about it. And I know that you've been doing RPG stuff, and I'm not really doing any RPG stuff. So this seemed like an awesome opportunity for you to kind of bring me into doing RPGs. And I just knew it would kind of be right up your alley as well. And I'm guessing I was right.
You were. I feel like that's a spoiler. But yeah, I've been really enjoying our playthrough of this. Mm-hmm. For a couple of different reasons. One, it did work really well as an intro because you had not really played anything other than one-off RPGs that I've made you play, like Millennial Apartment Hunters, or I think you've played Dread or something like that. Mm-hmm. But for something that has a continuous story, it's not something you've done. And it was a lot easier to be like, okay, we're going to sit down for 45 minutes. I will literally read you the entire character, race, and class book, and you just get to make whatever you want, than to be like, here's 100 and something page player handbook, read through all of it, decide who you want to be and what you're going to do with your whole next several months. This was way easier. Plus, sort of a thing that I didn't expect was that this works really well as a remote gaming opportunity for us. You travel a lot for work, which is not going to be a big surprise to anybody who listens to this podcast. But we were able to just sort of FaceTime, and I was reading the book. I had the books here with me, and you actually had copies that you had pulled up online, because Fantasy Flight has all of the character creation stuff, and I think probably the additional books as well online. But we were able to just read through it, and you could make the choices as if you were just in the living room with me. We also have never played this at a table. This is a couch game. But it was a really great remote experience, and it allowed us to sort of have this fun adventure when otherwise we wouldn't necessarily be able to play a board game. That is a space that RPGs fill really well because they are so story-based, and because this doesn't have any kind of map. I mean, it has a map of the town of Dragonholt, but that's just a picture. Yeah. Like, it doesn't have any kind of spatial map thing, something like D&D 4 would have. Yeah. It is really great for remote play.
Yeah, this is something, what I wanted to say is this is the most comfortable game I've ever played in my life, because really just did pretty much all of the play laying down on the couch. And just that kind of freedom to experience this kind of emergent story and learn, about how RPGs work and kind of get into that feel was really relieving, because one of the things that's always been kind of a a stopping block for me as somebody who's wanted to get into RPGs is the time commitment and the energy commitment. And like, I love hearing about the D&D 5th campaign that you are doing with Dan and the rest of the team there. But just, it's very intense, and I see the amount of time that you put into it, and especially the amount of time that Dan puts into it as the GM.
Yeah, I mean, Dan puts in far and above more time than any of the rest of us do.
Oh, yeah.
But
it's the kind of thing that I want to learn more about RPGs, and I want to get into the feel and kind of the understanding about how the process works. And Legacy of Dragonholt turned out to be such a fantastic way for me to get into that mindset, to the point where I'm thinking about my character constantly, and I'm thinking about what he would do in situations, and just really enjoying playing in that space for kind of the first time, for any extended period of time at least.
sort of going hand in hand with this being a really good starter RPG is the fact that this works so well at a lower player count.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if I were running a D&D 5th game with 2 people, that would be a very boring D&D 5th game. That would be a DM and one other person. But to be able to play Legacy of Dragonholt with 2 people, no sweat. You can play this game solo, and I think Crystal from Board Game Blitz played it completely solo and had a great time doing so. But the fact that you can play this with a really small group of people, or in this case, like you and I can play it, and it's just fun, silly fun. You don't have to worry about, like, other people judging you, which our friends wouldn't, but, like, if you're just getting into playing role-playing games, then this is a really great thing because it works with just, like, one other person. So you can go through and be like, okay, this is what I do. How do I make a character? What do I want to do with this character? What are the decisions that are important? And the book is really good about telling you how you're going to be using the skills that you have and how all of the modules work, like the book modules work. It has little call-out boxes that anytime there's a new mechanic, teach you how it is. And if it's anything character-based, they use the example of an NPC that you are with throughout much of the game, and to say, like, okay, we made this character Miriam. Miriam is a gnome. Miriam is an alchemist. And this is why this is the case, and this is what I thought those skills would be. And it really shows you what you should be doing. How have you found the story so far? Have you found it engaging?
Yeah, I guess I have so far. You know, obviously this is kind of quote-unquote on rails because it's a book, not a person. They're not coming up with new emergent story ideas. But I felt like I've had interesting decisions to make, and the decisions have produced results that felt real. You know, when we choose where we're going to go that particular day, maybe we're going to pop into the pub or we're going to pop into the smithy and see something scene there. And all of the scenes have felt correct. It's all felt like, you know, it's happening at the right time of day. And I think a lot of that is just kind of the strength of the design of the book. You talked about how, depending on where you go, you have different readings that you pick out for what day it is or what time of day it is. And I really appreciate the depth of that kind of design there, so that if we go back to the same pub twice, maybe it's going to actually present us with something different, even though we started with the same kind of circumstance.
I also like the way that the story point notation works. Mm-hmm. Once you complete sort of a side quest or you get a piece of information for the main story, it will tell you to mark a story point. And there are times where you'll read a passage and one of the options says, if story point B3 or if story point Z7 is marked, then you do this passage as opposed to doing what would otherwise be read. Mm-hmm. And in that way, it takes into account what you've already done while still being an unchanging document. Like, you are marking on your character sheet what you've done, so you don't get pieces of story out of order, which I think would make it really sort of disjointed and bad if they hadn't done that. So that really takes a choose-your-own-adventure book and allows it to be a little bit more, I want to say, like, limber, which isn't the right word, but it's the word that comes to mind.
I think it's a triumph of structure is kind of what you're feeling, in that it's internally consistent. And I really love it. And a lot of these are very short passages. You know, you might have 1 or 3 paragraphs in each thing before it takes you on. Yeah, 1 or 3, never 2 paragraphs before it takes you on to the next turn. And I think the brevity of those paragraphs, for the most part, you know, obviously some are much longer, depending on if it's a major story point, but the brevity of those allows it to kind of branch in a way that makes sense depending on the decisions you've made because of those story points. more frequent changes and you're hopping around in that book more is going to tailor it directly to the experience you've had so far. I've really enjoyed it, and I've never, I don't think we've had a single thing that didn't feel consistent to where we currently were. There was no just this is an obvious story we've seen before kind of thing.
Yeah, we've been surprised, but never thrown, I want to say, by the results of our decisions. Nothing ever felt inconsistent, but sometimes surprising, which is good. You want it to be a little bit surprising. You don't want it to be like, oh, I know exactly what's going to happen if I make this choice, so I won't make it because that's boring. Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the skill system as well, because I feel like that naturally flows into what we're talking about with the way story points work. Basically, your skills are, like you said, it's just a keyword like agility or persuasion or runes. I have that particular one. And coming up in some of the decision points in the story, it'll say, if you have the keyword runes, you can do this. How do you feel that works in representing the way that you make decisions in an RPG? Does that feel like a good distillation there?
Well, whether it makes a good distillation of how you do skills in an RPG is less interesting to me than the fact that when you take those skills, it is a trade-off. Mm-hmm. At the beginning, you have a max number of stamina that you would receive if you took 5, which is the lowest possible number of skills that you can start a character with. And you can make your character much more skilled. You can go up to, I think, 8 skills. But for every skill that you take above 5, you're going to lose stamina. Mm-hmm. So you are going to be essentially more of a wizard. You are going to be a squishier character, but you have more choices that you are going to be able to do later down the road, which is going to open up more paths to you. But it's also more chance that you're going to step into something that you can't handle based on your stamina level. And when you go to 0 stamina, you actually disable one of your skills. So maybe you took 7 skills, but your stamina was lowered by that. And when you went to go fight an opponent, they got you down to 0 stamina. And now you have 6 skills for really nothing. And I think that's an interesting choice. I'm not entirely sure it how the skill system represents an RPG, because there are so many RPG systems that you can work in. It is certainly one way that RPGs do skills. Something like D&D has a robust leveling up system, and you're going to be taking feats, and you're going to be having different types of things that you can do with your attacks and your spells if you're a spell caster. But something like, I want to say like Fate, which is a lot more simple, it more reflects the way decisions are handled in a more simple RPG-based system, which is fine. There is room for all kinds of base systems, and I think if they had made it more complicated, it wouldn't have worked with the way that this game plays. It needed to be a fairly simple but impacting system.
How do you feel about the way that not every skill is always usable? I feel like we've had some situations, mainly battles, where maybe I've had a skill like agility and I wanted to apply it to a situation and it's not one of the options there. Do you feel like it makes sense in terms of the way that, an RPG would work and would roll out, that sometimes those skills aren't available to you as a resolution to a situation?
I think it does, because when you take the skills, they give you an example of what those skills apply to. Mm-hmm. So it's not just saying, oh, you are agile. It's saying you are agile, and that means you are going to be able to do this or this or this. And because not everything that you would automatically think agility would be useful for falls into exactly what they want that skill to be, mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like, oh, I could use this, but then you're like, oh, no, it isn't actually that skill, because that skill has actually been defined.
Okay.
So I think the fact that we did character creation and then skipped a couple of days, we didn't skip any of the story, but we took a break for a couple of days, and now we're going back to it a week and a half, I think I want to say later we're at now. Maybe the idea that, oh, I want to be using my agility skill here sort of draws your imagination, but there, like any system, a skill has a definition, and they've defined it decently, and every time that you've been able to use something, I feel like it reflects the definition that they gave it when you chose it at the beginning.
Okay. One thing I also appreciate is that limiting of skills eliminates the quote-unquote annoying player character who is able to apply that, one skill to everything and comes up with a crazy reason for it to work. So I always hear that as being like one of the horror stories of RPGs. You have the one annoying player in the group that decides to find a way to make whatever agility be every kind of fighting skill or every kind of stealth skill or something like that.
I wouldn't say that's the biggest problem, but I think the fact that you can't always make the decision also helps with that as well, because the person who is applying the skill has to be the person who's making the decision. So we have 2 players, so that's often, like, we're often making decisions, but if you had a bigger group, like, maybe I have thievery, which I actually do have thievery in our game, and I would want to go, pick this person's pocket to get a key to something or whatever, key to the castle. But I've already made a decision, and I have to let other people use their skills. So you're not able to just use a skill over and over and over to get through something or sort of spam a skill unless a bunch of people in your group have it if you've got a bigger group.
Okay, I see where you're going at with that. I've really enjoyed playing this 2 players. I think it's such a fantastic experience where we're able to collaborate on a lot of decisions and talk through a lot of stuff when one player's decision is, ultimately final. But it's been a really just rewarding experience working through this, and I think it's a fantastic game for 2 players. I want to circle back around to some about the components. Like we've talked about a lot, I enjoy the structure of the books. I think that that's really fantastic. I like that when we leave the town, we get a different book out. I definitely felt like venturing out. The thing that I've really enjoyed that I wasn't expecting is the supplemental material that comes with a kind of a 10-fold map of the entire town of Dragonholt, so you get to see where everything is in relation to everything else. I'm hoping at some point we have some kind of spatial, puzzle. Like we need to know, oh man, well this person could have only escaped this way. I think that's, a good use that you could do with that map, theoretically. And it also comes with 2 other things. You have a letter, and then you have a journal of one of the characters in the game. And those are some supplemental materials that didn't need to exist, and I love the fact that they're in there. This is really a step up for production quality on something like I would have expected from this. And the journal, for example, is what? I think it was 10, 12 pages or something.
Yeah.
And you read through pretty much the whole thing when we finally got that. And, probably added a half an hour to our play session that time. But it was really cool to get an artifact of that world in something that is kind of just a book of adventure stories.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's not necessary. I have a feeling a lot of the points of that book are going to come back and be useful in decision-making. We are not at the end of this. I do want to say we are doing a 6-pack review. We have played it 6 times. We are not at the end of the story.
Right.
But we wanted to talk about it while we were still involved in it, and I would not be surprised if a lot of those journal points come back.
True. I think more I'm just surprised that they gave us this whole journal rather than just giving us a few story points or something like that.
Fair
which
enough.
Could have been a really easy out to cut down, a few bucks production costs on this thing. But that plus the high quality of the books, they're all... The Dragonholt book is like 100 pages long or something. It's well bound. And all of these supplemental books are, good paper, good quality, super easy to read, very... well organized. And I'm just really loving the production of everything here.
This is the first time in a very long time that I can think of where Fantasy Flight was putting something out that was very much in our wheelhouse. We are generally not Fantasy Flight gamers. For one, I don't think either of us particularly like Star Wars. But this one surprised me. I mean, I had heard about it and I was like, oh, that does sound kind of cool. But it wasn't really on my radar for something that I needed to pick up. When you brought this home, I was like, oh, that's pretty neat. And it was nice of him to think that we can do this together and we'll do it and it'll be fun. But, I'm really enjoying it more than I thought I would, which is cool. It's fun to be able to do, to sort of sit down in the afternoon on a weekend and just go through this story, get all these narrative points and have fun making the decisions and talking about what our characters would do. I don't think that there's ever been a point where, your character was so important to who, or to what you were doing in the story. That is, I guess, the weakest point for me.
Yeah.
The interaction that your character has. I have an orc thief. And I have rarely felt like I was an orc thief because there wasn't a ton of character interplay, because obviously it's not a person who can take into account what you've created and play off of it. You don't have like a way to feed the backstory that you create in character creation into the book. Mm-hmm. The book has got to be what the book is. But I've never really felt like my orc thief was the person in the story. I felt like, okay, I am player character, and I have certain skills, and I'm the person in the story. That's the weak point for me in this game.
Yeah, I guess that didn't really occur to me a whole lot, because I'm playing a catfolk, for example, and we came across another catfolk, which is pretty rare. I can say that, unsurprisingly, there's other members of my race in the world. And I feel like, had this been a GM-driven campaign or something, they would have found a way to work that in, at least have some kind of a moment right there, which I guess I kind of would have appreciated, to have any kind of thing like that.
Yeah, the Merriam character that they created has a traveling companion who is also an orc. Mm-hmm. And in the book, when they're talking about the different races of orcs, they talk about how tribal orcs sort of have a feud with city-dwelling orcs because they feel like they're soft. And I had created a city-dwelling orc because my orc is a thief. I'm like, oh, it should be in a place where there's stuff to steal. Mm-hmm. And there was no way for me to interact with this other orc and sort of live out that tension, which is something that I feel like a good DM would have definitely seized upon.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking for that kind of really adaptive storytelling, this may feel a little bit stifled for you. But if you're just looking for sort of a lighthearted adventure where you can take some RPG and take some choose your own adventure, this is a good way to go.
Cool. So, final thoughts. I would say Legacy of Dragonholt has lived up to exactly what I wanted it to be. It's a way for me, the non-RPGer, to get into the feel of RPGs and have a guided narrative experience that presents some twists and turns and has some of the light mechanics that I want to learn more about. It's been rewarding so far, and I'm really excited to continue playing this. And it's enhanced even more by the fact that it plays so well with 2, which gives us pretty much a guaranteed awesome game to play through all of the holidays, which we are very rapidly approaching. So I'm really excited to dig through the rest of the books.
Yeah, I feel like if you are looking for something that is really story heavy and you just want to sit down and tell a story with another person or with a group, or I mean, even honestly, if you just want to read a story by yourself, that's where this shines. There is a little bit of interaction with it, and they've created a system around the interaction, which for me, if you can put a nice little system around something, that always makes me feel happy. That's just the nerd I am. But it is an interesting and fun way to spend some time. It is not going to scratch. If you are like a hardcore RPGer that really loves the way interactions work and stats work, and you want to be able to min-max your character and get a whole lot of personalized feedback, this is not that. But I have a feeling that if you've got somebody in your life that is interested in RPGs or just doesn't have the time to commit to a full campaign, that's the other beauty of this. I mean, you can play a session in 45 minutes to an hour and get a nice little nugget of story that feels sort of wrapped up nicely, not like you're stopping in the middle. Whereas, when we do RPGs, that's 3, 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes. This is a nice little self-contained, easy to get a hold of, easy to understand story, and it feels like a story. And I think that's how it shines. This is not going to be your really meaty RPG, but it is definitely going to be enjoyable.
Cool. Well, that is Legacy of Dragonholt. Want a second opinion on some of the games we talked about on this episode? Check out some other great content creators at punchboardmedia.com. Alrighty, well, Danielle, Dragonholt. We're done with that part. But what do dragons make?
Baby dragons?
Well, smoke. We're going for smoke. Danielle, you wanted to talk about smoked beer.
I do. I would like to talk about Rauchbiers in our beer primer today.
Beer primer.
Actually, until the early 19th century, much, if not all, beer was slightly smoky in character because it was the only way to roast malt. You had to roast the malt over an open flame, and when you light things on fire, it creates smoke. That's how the idiom goes.
That's where that... Oh.
This character was so common that it often wasn't even mentioned when people were talking about beer, because it was like, oh, it's beer. Yeah, it's a little smoky, because that's how we make the beer. In the 17th century, they started to take some steps to sort of get rid of this smoky flavor, or at least minimize it. There was the invention of the indirect malting kiln, but there was also the advent of coke, not any of the ones you're talking about, the one that is a cleaner form of coal, because previously people had been smoking their malt using either wood, straw, which was a lot cheaper than wood and easier to come by, or coal, which was not only heavily taxed, but burned real grossly. I mean, if you've ever seen anybody who's been around a coal fire, it's very sooty, and you don't want that in the food that you're making.
Yeah.
So they had the advent of coke, which is a more smoke-free version of coal, but it was also very pricey, so it wasn't really viable to be used in a production brewery. A lot of the move away from smoking things with wood, because previous to this, people had just lit wood on fire, and that's how you smoke your malt. But at this point, England had a limited amount of trees, because it's an island, and they had been moving towards this more coal and straw-based smoking of their malts. At the time, though, the popular beer in England was actually a porter, which was made with smoked malts. But once they brewed the beer, they would take it and rest it for a while, hoping that that smoked character would sort of fall out. And if you've ever had a beer that's had a lot of flavor added to it and you let it sit for a really long time, unless it's, some really intense flavors like chocolate that gets put into a stout or something, a lot of times something like a smoke will fall out if you keep it too long. So they were brewing these beers with the smoked malt and essentially just letting them sit. In the 19th century, the drum kiln was invented, and this is sort of the thing that starts moving away from smoky character in all beer. The drum kiln allowed malt to be roasted without ever exposing it to the fire, which not only increased the range of colors and flavors that you could get from the malt, but it wouldn't necessarily give it that smoky je ne sais quoi. Once this became popular, it was also sort of timed with the rise in popularity of clean, light beer, so pretty much everybody moved to this, except the fine brewers of Bamberg, Germany. And Bamberg, Germany has a ton of brewers per capita. At one point, the city, which had 77,000 people, had 9 brewers within city limits and several dozen in the surrounding area. Ooh. So, like Beer City, Germany. They decided that they liked the white birch that they had been using to smoke their malts, and the way they actually stored the wood, they would store it for up to a year before they used it to smoke the malts, because aging the wood got rid of a lot of the unpleasant side flavors, and it kept with a more consistent flavor when they were brewing the beer from the smoked malt. Smoked malt, smoked beer, and in German, smoked beer is Rauchbier. That's where the name of this stuff comes from. It literally just means smoked beer.
Oh, okay.
There are 2 main breweries in Bamberg that are actually known for making Rauch beers. Brauerei Schrankerla and Christian Mer's Brauerei Special. They have been brewing Rauch beers since, the first one I think since like 1300 something, and the other since 15 or 1600. So we are talking about really long established breweries. And they've been brewing this really nice white birch smoked beer for a long time, and it is really just from that region that we get this idea of the Rauchbier. Rauchbier is generally copper to brown in color, and it has a malt sweetness to balance out the smokiness. It also has a smokiness, because if it didn't have that, it wouldn't be a Rauchbier. You don't often see a lot of breweries in the US doing these, and for some reason I've noticed that they tend to be more popular out west. I know when we go out to Albuquerque to visit your family, we often see a smoked style of beer, whereas in the Carolinas by us, I don't see a ton of them. I can think of a few offhand, but they're nowhere near as popular, I don't feel like.
Yeah.
But there has been sort of a resurgence in the U.S. of bringing that smoked character especially to porters. Like we talked earlier, how porters have that smoked characteristic that they used to have aged out of them. Well, you think about a smoked porter, Alaskan has a smoked porter, Stone has a smoked porter. You get all of these beers which are having that smoky flavor, so hopefully we'll get more breweries brewing Rauch beers. I would be very happy for it, because I love a good Rauch beer.
Yeah, it's a good style, and it's very underrepresented in American craft breweries, which is a bummer. because smoked beer, exciting flavor,
And
kind
I
of like
feel
meat.
like this is the time of year. Mm-hmm. Like, it's getting into fall. It finally got to not 90 degrees here, which is
Woo!
really awesome. And, like, the smokedness of the beer reminds me of, like, bonfires and fall events. So, not everybody likes a Marzen. Not everybody likes a pumpkin beer. Not everybody's going to like a Rauchbier, but here's another option if you want a fall beer. I happen to like them, so I wanted to talk about them.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing that. As always, doing a great beer segment for us today. And that's kind of going to bring us to the end of this episode. I'm not doing a final round this episode. I've been under the weather in the last few weeks and just completely forgot to even put it up. But if you would like to participate in the next Draft Mechanic final round, you can always jump in on our Slack channel, draftmechanic.net/Slack, and join the conversation in there where we talk about board games and beer and make puns, mainly puns. So draftmechanic.net is where you can go for all your Draft Mechanic needs. At Draft Mechanic on your social medias of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all those regular places. You can send us an email at draftmechanic@gmail.com if you so desire, I guess. That's also an option.
You can also head over to our Board Game Geek Guild number 2470.
Yeah, pick up that micro badge.
If you happen to be in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, once again, we have a meetup on Tuesday, October 16th at Salud Cerveceria, and we have one on November 1st at Good Road Cider Works.
Woohoo! Draft Mechanic is sponsored by Gray Fox Games. Visit grayfoxgames.com and sign up for their newsletter for the latest Gray Fox Games, quality games, cleverly crafted. Okay, I think that's it. Other than the final round, did I forget anything?
Well, as always, I'd like to remind our listeners to please game responsibly and tell them that we'll see them back here in 2 weeks for another round.
There it is. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Draft Mechanic episode 86 was recorded on Monday, October 15th, 2018 in front of a live studio cat, but he's been sleeping the whole time.
Beauty is in your eyes, you are the beholder. You render me stricken. Do not go gently into that gutter line.
Hi, this is Eric Buscemi, popping in to let you know about a continuing interview series I've been doing on the Punchboard Media website called In Focus, Perspectives in Board Gaming. I've been interviewing people that work in all different facets of the board game industry, such as designers Nikki Valens and Danielle Salas, artists Fernanda Suarez and Beth Sobel, board game publishers Anne-Marie DeWitt and Shari Spiro, and many other people with unique industry perspectives. Check out our interviews on the Punchboard Media website, www.punchboardmedia.com, where a new one is posted every Wednesday afternoon.
Punchboard Media, where we all bring something to the table.
Pull up a chair
at punchboardmedia.com.